So today we're working on a 2013 Camaro. It is the V6 model. Automatic transmission. Alternator is not working. And what they're getting is, whenever the car's running, okay, if you see where it says service battery charging system, you'll see that here in just a second. So that generally means that your alternator's bad. And I've just checked this car, and the alternator is bad. Now there's two different things that can go wrong. Well, I mean, there's more than two, but obviously the alternator can be bad. You can have bad regulator or any other internal alternator parts. But you've also got, on these, you've got what they call an AOD. I believe that's terminology. The overdrive, automatic overdrive decoupler, where that pulley, it's not just a fixed pulley on the alternator anymore. And once we get the belt off, we'll check that to see if that's the problem. Sometimes those can go bad, and so it actually will not spin the alternator. The belt will turn, and it'll look like it should be spinning the alternator, but the alternator won't be spinning. And obviously, if the alternator's not spinning, it's not going to charge. So either way, we're probably going to be taking the alternator off. But the first thing that you want to do is kind of make access to everything. So you're going to pull your, that's normally, yeah, that wasn't snapped down all the way. But basically just take that cover off, and we're going to take the inlet duct off here, either a flat blade screwdriver or a 5/16 or 8mm. Either one will loosen these clamps off. And we're just taking this off to get it out of the way, because it's easy enough to. We'll just set it up there. And that kind of opens it up pretty good to where you can at least get to most of it. Of course, you've got the water pipe for the radiator. That's kind of in your way, but obviously you can work around it. There's the alternator. Get some light down here, and you can kind of hopefully I'm angling that camera right to where you can kind of see, you know, the fasteners that you've got to get to. Of course, the first thing, we're going to have to loosen the belt off. Belt looks good, so we shouldn't have to change that. And to get the belt, you got your tensioner with a 1/2-inch drive, square drive in it. So we'll just get a 1/2-inch breaker bar or ratchet and stick in there. We'll loosen that tensioner off, and I'm just going to pull the pulley or pull the belt off with the alternator and let the rest of the belt stay where it's at. So let me get the tools for that, and we'll get this done. And just so you see what I'm doing, I've got my bar in here, and I'm just lifting up and releasing the tension on that pulley, and you can see how it relaxes that belt. So I'm going to have two hands for this. So I'm going to set the camera down, get that belt off, and go from there. Okay, so the problem with this is that decoupler. And to check these, all you do is spin it, and if it free spins both ways, and you can tell that it's not turning the alternator, it's bad. You can buy those, but we're just going to replace the alternator, because for just a little bit more, you can get an alternator. Now, before you take the alternator off, you want to disconnect the battery. But you don't have to go to the trunk where the battery is and disconnect it. You can disconnect it right here. This set of cables right here, one of them is the one that runs straight over to the alternator. This one here, it runs straight back to the battery. This is where this is where you're able to jump start or put jumper cables on the vehicle, so you can jump start it, so you don't have to get into the trunk, pull the floorboard out of the trunk and get to the battery, which is underneath the tire. So keep that in mind. You can just, it's a 13 millimeter, I believe, and you can, yeah, 13 millimeter, and you can disconnect the power from it. That way, when you take the alternator out, you're not going to arc it on the body. So just a little tip, so that you don't have to dig through your trunk. So now we're getting ready to take the alternator out. Just so you can see again, I think I've already showed this, but you've got two fasteners down there, and then you've got one right here. And I'll try to get the camera set up to where it's not in my way, to where you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm not going to use air tools on this. I'm just going to use a gear wrench. Reach down here. Got a 15 millimeter. One bolt. I hope you can see that. I can't see if the camera's on that or not, but both the bottom bolts. The top one is a stud. So you'll just have a nut on it. Wires are still hooked up, so I've got to kind of be careful not to drop and let it hang. And I'm just going to kind of pull it down so I can get to the top of it. There we go. Now we can get to the plug real easy, and the power wire. So there's the plug. And it looks like, what was that, a 13? You get a 13. Okay, just off camera, I just went ahead and took that 13 millimeter nut out. Or off, rather. And there's your cable. Alternator's free. Let me get both hands on this. Okay. Something else I didn't mention is I did kind of unsnap this. You just push in. You just push in on the two buttons, and it'll pull right off, and then just stick it right up here. That way you don't have to worry about breaking it. Alternator does come out of here. You just have to kind of finagle it out of there. But yeah, what the problem is with this alternator is the decoupler is in op. Alternator's not turning. You can see that it's not locked up. The inside of the rotor will turn, but whenever you turn the pulley, either way, you're supposed to be able to free spin this one way, but the other way, the regular rotation will turn the alternator. And you can just replace these. I've never done it, but I did see on the Parts House website that they have just the decoupler by itself. So I'm going to see what the owner of this car wants to do, and we're going to go from there. Okay, so I got the new alternator, and I'm going to show you what a good decoupler, how it's supposed to act. You saw on the other alternator, the pulley just free spun either direction, and the internal rotor of the alternator would not turn. Now this one, you can see that the internal part of the alternator is turning, and if you and right now, either way you go, it'll turn. Now, I'm going to real easily. I don't recommend sticking a screwdriver in an alternator, but if you do it easily, you're not going to damage nothing. So I'm just going to lock the rotor so the rotor of the alternator is not going to turn. And you can see that you can literally turn the pulley, and that's normal. I'm going to go the other direction, and it's locked. So going one direction, the alternator is going to be coupled up. Going the other direction, it's able to free spin, and that's the way these decouplers work. And you saw the way that other one went bad. The pulley spun, but the internal alternator did not. So the decoupler was all that was wrong. The problem was the Parts House said it had a 7 to 10 day lead time, and the owner of this car doesn't want to wait 7 to 10 days to get a decoupler in. So we're just going to put an alternator on it. And it's a sad deal that these alternators ain't cheap. This alternator was $250. Decoupler's $80 locally. You can get them online for about $50, maybe even cheaper. I didn't do a whole lot of looking. You do have to have a special toolkit to take these off, but you can get the toolkit online for about $30. So if you know your decoupler needs to be replaced and you have a little bit of time to wait, order the pulley and the toolkit, and you can change it. And you can change these on the car. You don't even have to remove the alternator. As long as you got the room to be able to get the tools and everything on the pulley, they actually come off pretty easy as long as you have the actual toolkit to be able to take them off. Anyway, I'm going to get set up back on the car so that we can get this alternator installed. Okay, now I just kind of finagled the alternator right down in this area. Went ahead and hooked the positive lead up. Make sure you put the cover back on. And I'm going to go ahead and, I need to have both hands for this, but I'm going to pick the alternator up, go ahead and plug this connector into the back so that it's all done. And then I'm going to get it up here and hang it up here on this upper stud. And I'm just going to go ahead and bolt it up. I mean, you guys don't need to see that. 3 bolts and it's back on. And then I'll come back and we'll take a look at it. We'll get the belt put back on and all that. So got the alternator hung up there. Got it hanging up on that upper stud. Got the nut on. Got the 2 bottom bolts started. And I'm just going to tighten them up. It was a very easy process to get it positioned in there. Probably going to be easier to go ahead and make sure you get both the power connector, the battery positive connector that goes to the battery hooked up, and then the 2-pin connector plugged in before you put the alternator up there. So I'm going to go ahead and finish just snugging this up, and then we'll get the belts on. Okay, the alternator's all bolted up. Next step, I'm going to go ahead and plug this on. And then the next step here, now when you put the belt on, you need to make sure that it's engaged in all the grooves all the way around on every, on every pulley that it's going on. So I'm going to get my bar here. And if you guys don't have one of these yet, you ought to get one, because they're pretty cheap. This is a Harbor Freight, but what's nice about it is I specifically use it for these tensioners, because it's adjustable. So you can pull this out. Sometimes on these tensioners you don't have a lot of room, so you've got to have a short one. Sometimes it needs to be a little bit longer to get the torque you need. And this you can adjust to whatever you need. That's specifically why I bought it. I had a car one time that I just didn't have the right length. I either had too long of a breaker bar, too short of a ratchet or breaker bar. And I thought, man, you know what? That I don't know if you see how. Yeah, I thought that Pittsburgh adjustable length ratchet would be perfect. So on this one I could lengthen it out a little bit if I needed to, but it fits down in here pretty good with it short. And you just pull up on this tensioner like that to release the tension on the belt. So I'm going to put the camera down, I'm going to pull up on the tensioner, reach over here, and pull the belt up on the alternator pulley. So I'll be right back. Okay, 15 seconds later, we got the belt put back on. So that's about it for that. Go ahead and put this back on. Alright, tighten these up, put the cover back on. Here's the extra nut for the old alternator. Hang on to that. Normally whenever I do these right here, I use a 5/16 or an 8mm, but for whatever reason I just grabbed my flat blade screwdriver. I don't like using a flat blade because it slips off like you just saw most of the time, and you get on there with a 6-point socket, it won't slip off. Alright, and that is it. Let's put this cover back on. The cover wasn't actually on all the way whenever I took it off. The cover just slides on. Oh yeah, we got to take our cap off there. Cover's on. Oh, one more thing. And we're going to need, see, what size was that? I think it was 13. Working one-handed is a new challenge whenever you're trying to do this. We got to hook this up. So let's set this screwdriver down. Make sure you're in view. Just going to pull up. Make sure that's down on the stud. This is the nut for it. Just tighten it up. Make sure you don't have to bear down on it just real tight, but make sure it's tight enough to where it's not going to loosen off on you. And then this cover just snaps on. so battery's all hooked up. So what we're going to do now is start it up. Let me get the scanner hooked up so we can monitor the voltage and all that good stuff. Actually, before I do that, let's go ahead and check. We're going to check. Car's off. I want to check battery voltage. And what we got right now is 12.29 volts. Car's not running. Let's start it up. .86, so we are now charging, which is what we want. And remember, all that was because of the stupid pulley. So if you've got time to order a pulley and order the toolkit, you could save yourself a couple $100. You know, if you can have your car set. If he could have had this car set for 7 to 10 days, then he could have got out of it for, you know, almost $200 less. But he needs his car back. Yeah, I guess that's it. So pretty simple job. If I wasn't filming and everything, probably would have taken 20 minutes to get the alternator off and the new one on. That does not include running up to the parts house. So anyway, you guys take care.